Hey guys, welcome to Creative Entrepreneurship, a podcast dedicated to helping entrepreneurs build their business based on successes and failures of other entrepreneurs. Today we have an amazing guest. We're going to be talking about being a producer for comedy. Please help me welcome Scott Edwards. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm so happy to be here, man. Abel Garza is the man on the microphone. Good to be here this morning. We have some great topics to talk about. Hope your listening audience is ready to have fun and learn.
Man, I'm excited to talk about this. This is one of the subjects that we have not talked about on this podcast, which is comedy. And, you know, being a creative entrepreneur and a serial entrepreneur like yourself, you've delved into many businesses. You've been doing great things and helping folks with their entrepreneurship. And one of the things that you're delving into is comedy. And so one of the questions I would have as a nascent entrepreneur who wants to go into the field of comedy is how you got started, you know, some of the challenges you've had, some of the successes, whether or not you bootstrapped it, what type of financing did you obtain, stuff like that. Before we get into that, though, please give us give us an idea of who you are, what you do, and how you've been helping people.
Hey, well, thanks for asking, Abel. So I am a serial entrepreneur. I started my first company at age 17, small construction company. Then I was in the disco era. Did I mention I'm old? Whoop, whoop. And then I opened my first comedy club. It was the 12th comedy club in the country in 1980. So a few years back, I ran it for 21 years. It is still operating today, just not under my guidance. I went on and worked in the auto industry. I was in the insurance industry. I've had restaurants, art galleries. I've produced 3 TV series, many concerts, and I've just had a blessed life. My secret to happiness is always doing things that were fun and interesting to me. When it came to comedy, it was kind of an interesting start, Abel. If you want to hear the story, I was selling life insurance and absolutely hated it. When you're 22 years old and you're selling life insurance, you don't think you're ever going to die, right?
Right.
So I was on vacation with my then girlfriend, soon to be wife, soon to be ex-wife, whoop, in Los Angeles, and I went by the Comedy Store, but it was the satellite one in Westwood, right by UCLA University. And it was, like a $2 cover. It was the Comedy Store is a showcase format, so it was comic after comic after comic. I had never seen this form of entertainment live. I was totally taken by it. I met Dave Coulier that night, George Wallace, Sandra Bernhardt, and I just fell in love with the idea. So I stayed all night, to the irritation of my girlfriend, talked to all the people involved, from the manager of the club to the comics. And then on that 6-hour drive back from LA to my hometown of Sacramento, I decided I was going to open a comedy club. And about 3 months later, I did.
Man, that's crazy. Well, you know, when producing a comedy club, it's an undertaking that requires careful planning and preparation. You need to book a venue, secure headliners, opening comedians. You need to hire them. A host. You need to sell drinks, food. What is it that you'd be expecting when you go into the business? What is it that I should expect when attempting to go into this business?
So what's great about stand-up comedy production is it's a cash business. So there's lots of ways to bring in some quick cash and be able to use that to build your business. But to get started, you're very right, Abel. You want to find the right location, like any business, a restaurant, a retail store. Stand-up comedy is just the same. If you're going to open a comedy room or a comedy club, it's all about location. And in my case, because I had no money and was doing everything by the seat of my pants, I negotiated the use of a banquet room in a nice restaurant, and they would have banquets during the day. I would tear down the banquet, set up my comedy club, do the door, seat the people, MC the show. And then after the show, I had to break down the club again because they were going to have banquets the next day. Mm-hmm. The great thing was, what I thought I was really smart about, was I didn't have to pay for the room because I let the restaurant make the food and drink money and I got the door money. And I did that for about 8 months. And that's where I built up enough to then get my own brick and mortar store. I was doing it all on my own initially. I had some friends helping me out by about the third or fourth month, and built up quite an empire. Ended up owning a chain of comedy clubs, three of them. And all those comedy clubs are also a bar and a restaurant. So I had to learn how to run a restaurant, learn how to run a bar, and produce comedy. It was quite an exciting time.
You know, that's I think that once you book the venue, you mentioned that you booked the venue, but then of course you have kind of like a sigh of relief that you've booked the venue. But then the things to consider once you've booked it, you know, are you looking at audio, the lighting, the parking? Are you looking at some of the amenities within that venue that give the customer or the people attending the experience that they need in order to consider
Right.
even buying a ticket?
Right. It's important to have the right experience. So after I made the decision to open a comedy club, I quit my job as a life insurance agent. I went bankrupt, so I had no debt. I had negotiated free use of this room, but then what, right?
No.
So what I did is I went back down to Los Angeles and visited two or three different comedy clubs, talked to the managers, talked to the comics, and took copious notes, what they were getting paid, what was expected by the comics, what was expected by the club owner or the manager. And I gleaned a lot of information, and then went back to Sacramento where they made this deal. And I brought in theatrical lighting because I wanted to look professional. I bought a used audio system and set it up in this banquet room. The stage was literally just a riser with a black curtain behind it. And that was enough to open up in August of 1980, when my very first act, my first opening act, was the very talented Gary Shandling.
Gary
He had
Shandling.
come out from Phoenix, Arizona. I paid him $150 for a week of work. And of course, nobody knew him then, but he went on to the Larry Sanders Show, the Gary Shandling Show, and starring in many, many movies. But Gary Shandling was unknown at the time. Here was the key, Abel. When I got started, when I met Dave Coulier, he introduced me to Bob Saget. Bob Saget introduced me to Gary Shandling. You know, I kept meeting these people, Jerry Seinfeld, all people that were not famous at the time, just really solid comics. And then, of course, as a producer, my number one goal was to find talent and bring it to Sacramento. So I would go to showcase nights in LA and in San Francisco and take notes. If I thought somebody was funny, then I would approach them and say, hey, here's my phone number. Call me. Let's see if we can get you up to the club. And so Sacramento, sadly, was stuck with my sense of humor. The only people I worked in the club were the people I thought were funny.
Yeah, yeah.
But I apparently had pretty good taste because, as I mentioned, I got a chance to work with some of the best, Robin Williams, Paula Poundstone, Tommy Chong. Yeah, it goes on and on. Pat Paulson, Harry Anderson. They all got a chance to work for me, and it was so exciting.
That's awesome, and it's exciting just to hear the transition and the trajectory of your career. And I remember, here in San Antonio when they first opened the comedy club up here in downtown San Antonio. I remember like people like Carlos Mencia, who nobody really knew who he was, who's showing up there, and it just makes sense that as they start out, you find the local headliners, you find the people that are local, and then all of a sudden, they're nationwide. They're just popular everywhere. When you're looking for a headliner, do you look for people that are local? Do you look for the funniest comedian in the area that you're in, or do you source that out to different locations?
Well, if you're starting a local club, like some of your listeners might, you want to work with the local base of comedy. All the cities, big or small, will have a few people that consider themselves stand-up comics. And if I was to start a business today, I would focus on the local entertainment value that you might have. In my case, I was determined to open what's called an A room. So it's like the step before you get a sitcom, right? It wasn't a showcase club. It wasn't an open mic. It was an A room. And what I did was I did tap into some of the local talent as MCs and opening acts, but I was bringing in people from San Francisco, Boston, New York, and LA, and really making sure that each and every week there was somebody worth paying for. Because keep in mind, the audience is a paid audience.
Mm-hmm.
You have an obligation to present value and entertainment when someone's paying you.
Yeah. And so, you book your headliner, you've had your focus on the local area, the local, I guess the local people there. When you're doing your the opening act, which I think is really important as well, they're the ones that warm up the audience. In many cases, they're the ones that kind of set the stage to how the headliner is going to go, and whether or not that we get them all, set the stage, so to speak, for that headliner. How do you identify your openers? Like, do you look at somebody who's maybe not so funny, or do you try to find as many funny people as you can?
Well, first off, I emceed my own shows, so I had to develop my own personality on stage and then develop it over the years to make sure the audience was engaged and aware of what was going on, who they were going to see and why. Excuse me a second.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting a tickle in my throat. So the opening acts, though, especially the local guys, what I was able to do was learn about the various aspects of what makes somebody funny. It's not just the class clown or somebody that goes up and drops a lot of F-bombs.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking for content, you're looking for quality, you're looking for somebody that engages with the audience. And so my job as the producer was to watch these people, give them an opportunity on my stage. I did open mics. I had some people that were just starting out. A great example was when she first came out from Boston. Paula Poundstone was really not funny, but she had this nugget of talent, this perspective that was, she's a little different, a little twisted, that everybody could see. And she was the only act in the history of my club I let work multiple weeks, night after night on stage. And after every set, we would sit down and say what worked and what didn't work and why, and really helped her hone her comedy, helped her find her comedy voice. And then she went on to being, one of the top comedians in the country, and is still out touring today. And she has her own podcast. She's very successful. But when she started, she needed to work. And the what a comedy club is a training ground for people that are interested in being funny on a entertainment level. Again, not the funniest guy in your office or the guy that puts a lampshade on his head at an office party, right? We're talking about people that have, the comics have to engage and make people that paid money to be seen, to be entertained.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole different level. Whether you're an opening act or a headliner, whether you're doing 5 minutes or an hour, you have an obligation to entertain that audience. So my job was to find those talents, find those lumps of coal, you might say, and turn them into the diamonds that they had the potential to be. Another example is Brian Posehn started off as a local open mic comic at my club, and you may recognize his name. He was recently a regular on The Big Bang Theory for the last decade, So you never know where they're going to end up. There's been plenty of people that were really funny, but ended up not getting a huge career out of it. They had fun, they made a little money, but it wasn't in the cards for them to get famous. So what's great about comedy is whether you're famous or not so famous, there's some value you can bring to an audience.
So I'm curious to know, because I want to throw in some of the business side of it. I'm assuming that the mic night, the open mic night, is somewhat of a resume for people coming in, for you to see if they're funny or not. do you focus that on like the type of crowd that's available within the venue? Is it like friendly, like family friendly? Do you focus on like family friendly type of comedy, or do you go, vulgar? I know you said that it's not somebody who necessarily uses a lot of f bombs. Do you focus on the demographic? Do you consider the demographic prior to booking headliners and openers?
So my job as a producer or director of a show is to make sure that the entertainment presented is going to fit my audience. So my audience was the adults 18 and over in Sacramento. So I was using a lot of Jay Leno and Ray Romano and Jerry Seinfeld, those kind of Midwestern, middle of the road, not real dirty, good monologist, and because that's what Sacramento related to. If you're in San Francisco, you might have a more esoteric comic. If you're in, a rough neighborhood, maybe you have a little bit edgier
Mm-hmm.
comic. Now, I gave a good variety to my audience. I mean, there was sometimes we had what are called blue shows or dirty shows, but we would tell the audience, hey, this show's going to be a little more adult
Mm-hmm.
than our regular show. And if you're not going to, you don't want to participate, we're happy to give you your money back. But this show's going to be talking about sex or marriage or um, interactions with people on a more graphic basis. The guys that just drop F bombs to me aren't funny. And if I saw them in a showcase, I'd say, look, if you could be funny without dropping F bombs, come back and see me. If not, this is not the right venue for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, as a producer or director of a show, you're also the editor. So, it was up to my decision who was allowed on my stage and who wasn't. So, I made that determination based on the quality of the material. The other thing, Abel, that's interesting about comedy is everybody starts off with 3 minutes. That's a long time on stage, maybe 3 minutes of material, maybe 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
If they work it over and over with different audiences and they build on it and build on it, then they have 20 minutes now or half an hour. Now they can be a feature act.
Yeah.
They get to 45 minutes to an hour. Now they're a headliner. So, Gary Shandling started off as an opening act for me, but was so talented and such a good writer and such a good performer, he was soon a headliner. Um, that could be said about a few people, and there's a few people that never got past opening act or feature act. It just really depended on the material, the
Yeah.
quality of the performance, and what they brought to the audience.
I always thought that was interesting, the way comedians can come on stage and kind of introduce new jokes and see how the audience reacted, and then kind of manipulate those jokes later to make them even more funny. I remember
They're always growing, always building,
yeah,
right,
I remember seeing like George Lopez, and when he came to San Antonio one time, and he was introducing some new jokes, and oh my gosh, I remember hearing those for the first time, and then him taking them to his next gig, and before you know it, they were just refined beyond belief, just crazy. You talked about being a host, and we talked about how this is the person who introduces the comedians, keeps the show running smoothly. The host doesn't necessarily have to be a comedian, but definitely has to have some insight as to, or maybe even a slight sense of humor, and not necessarily one with their of one of their main assets, but definitely has to have a knack for improvising and thinking on their feet. Do you do the hosting the majority of the time, or do you hire somebody who can host in that fashion, or do you find comedians to host?
So there's two ways of going. A lot of club owners will hire a local comic, try to develop them as an MC, which is a different talent. You're absolutely correct. When you're the MC, you're kind of the ringmaster of the show, and you're making sure the acts are doing the correct time. You make sure that the audience is engaged and they get their service, and you talk about the food menu and make sure you tip the waitresses. Don't just tip them, push them all the way over. Have some fun with the audience.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, I was the MC. So I was very stiff originally because I had never done it before. So I'd wear a suit, and I was very, here we are, and, kind of Ed Sullivan like, right? and here's our next show. But what I learned was the best way to engage with an audience was to be honest and to be real, and the comedy comes from interacting with the audience. So, obviously there's a bachelor party or a birthday. It's the MC's job to get that stuff out of the way so that the audience doesn't override the paid professional comic, right? So it was my job to let them hoot and holler and be stupid, and then once they got done, okay, now it's time for real comedy. So
Mm-hmm.
I was the one they were able to beat up on. I was the one engaging with the audience on a very basic level and keeping them energized and keeping them focused. The other thing that's interesting that your audience may want to know is that much like a song or a musician does with a song, or what they might do in a concert, a comedy show is always something that starts off at one level, then it takes it to the next level, and then you have the headliner, which is like the crescendo. You have to keep building. I was a DJ during the disco years. You never started your dance party with the most high energy song, right? You'd wipe out the crowd.
For sure.
So you'd start off with some slow dances, and then you maybe take them to some medium speed stuff, and then you maybe end up with some rock and roll, kind of get them out going crazy. And then what do? You take them back down to slow music. It's like a wave, right? Comedy's the same thing. You can't ever get the audience all the way to the top of the wave and leave them there. They won't survive. You got to have ups and downs. It's like a melody. You have to work the audience, work your comedy in a way that the audience is on the trip with you. I hope that makes sense.
It does. It's so funny. It's so amazing that you're able to just talk about the vicissitudes of how comedy is, and looking at it as a crescendo, like you said, it's amazing because you always talk about in music, you want the highs and lows, and then you want to, you know what I mean, and then unless you're like Barney on How I Met Your Mother, where everything needs to be high, and I don't know if you saw that
right
episode.
no I definitely did, but like you said, if you went to go see a concert of your favorite rock band and they came out and they played their number one hit, would you stay for the rest of the show? No, they come out and they do their new stuff and the stuff they're trying out, then they end on the big stuff, and then they always have an encore, right? So you have to have something that'll top your best stuff. So it's the same in comedy. A really good comic brings the audience up and kind of proves they're funny. They're able to maintain a certain level of comedy. We call it laughs per minute, and then be able to hit them with the punchline or the closer. And just like when that joke's done, the audience wants to jump to their feet laughing, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. I love your perspective. I love your wisdom on this. It's very insightful. There's some part of the business that I really want to focus on too. Is like, you've written or edited your show. You've got your venue, you got your headliner, your opener, you've got your host down, you've focused on the demographics, you've done your rehearsals. Now, how do you market this? Like, you've written everything, you have several ways of doing this. Do you prepare in advance as far as advertising? Do you, get with local radio stations? Are you talking to newspapers or any kind of media? How do you even, I guess, obtain the content for that as well? Do you hire a photographer, videographer for the rehearsals and look at it and see how you're gonna, I guess, use this as a crescendo into the marketing area? How do you do that? How do you market it and get it to so that people can start buying tickets?
Well, you kind of brought up two different things. One is the marketing and promotional aspects of owning a comedy club, and the other is how do you keep track of somebody that's funny or not funny and all that. So the short answer to the second part of that question is, as the producer of the show, I made a point of watching all the acts and taking notes, and I made a decision. I could usually tell in the first couple minutes if somebody has that nugget of talent that can be honed or not. And there was plenty of times I told people, I sat him down. You got to be brutally honest and say, look, you either got to write some different material or change your personality because you're not hitting it for this and this and this reason. But the exciting part of my job as a producer was to find somebody like a Brian Posehn or a Paula Poundstone and say, wow, you've got something unique. What are we going to do to really make it connect with the audience, and work with them night after night, show after show, and help them develop as a professional entertainer. The other part of it is marketing a comedy club. I did everything without any money. So in the initial days, I did 2-for-1 tickets and passed them out everywhere I could. Go to a bakery, go to a gas station. Hey, here's a 2-for-1 pass. Come on out and check out Laughs Unlimited. Or I did flyers of the who's coming out each week, and I'd take those flyers and leave them at the bank and leave them at the grocery store. A lot of them got thrown away, but a lot of them got viewed, right? Then once I kind of got the club going, then there wasn't a lot going on in Sacramento at the time, especially entertainment wise. So the entertainment editors from the 2 newspapers would send in reporters, and I got reviews of the shows. And we loved that because whether they liked the show or not, it was free advertising. Then you did tap into something that is important. The third stage was I made a point of offering stand-up comics like Jay Leno, like Ray Romano, like Bob Saget, that I could take to radio stations. A lot of them had a morning zoo or a disc jockey that had to keep things upbeat in the morning. I would take in a Bruce Baum or Tim Bedore, some comic, and let them, be the extra juice, the extra energy for that morning's radio show. And that was, again, free advertising. So there's a local station, a hard rock station called KZAP at the time here in Sacramento. And I got in with Bob Keller and Tim Bedore, who were 2 of the DJs. Tim Bedore went on to be a stand-up comic with great celebrity. But I was able to bring in guys almost weekly. And it's like, that was great because the radio station got some free entertainment and I got some free marketing, and everybody got a good laugh out of it.
Nice. Yeah, man, that's some great insight. I love it. You got your marketing down. You're utilizing local stations, flyers. You've got the marketing down. Now, do you request any kind of sponsors?
I was very unlucky. I've never been good at asking for money. I never had the credit to go get a loan. Remember, I mentioned I went bankrupt to start my club. It was a really stupid move. I wrote off like $4,000, and yet I ruined my credit for 10 years. Right. So I did everything ass backwards back then. I should not have done that. Anybody thinking of opening a comedy club, have good credit, because then you can buy newspaper ads, you can borrow money to promote and market your place. I was not that smart.
Yeah, well, you had to utilize the resources that you had available, and obviously,
yeah, and that's why I did things like flyers and 2-for-1 tickets, and went on to radio shows. In fact, a lot of the morning TV shows, they heard what was happening on the radio, and I started getting invited to bring comics onto morning TV shows, like AM Sacramento or something. And it slowly built, but it was so successful that I opened in 1980. And by 1986, I had 2 clubs. By 1988, I had 3 clubs. And we also, I produced 2 TV series and a 1-hour special for the Fox network. And I was all based on that initial, night in a banquet room with Gary Shandling and like 30 people in the audience. I mean, it was really exciting to be a part of, because it didn't happen overnight. Nothing does.
So
a lot of these people in comedy, they think they're an overnight success. Trust me, they worked on their act for years.
So you have the ability now to go out there and look for sponsors. Is that something that you, I guess, if you have the capability, the ability to do that, should you do that?
I've never been any good at it, Abel, so I'm not a good person to ask.
Gotcha.
Sponsors are great because they're giving you money in trade for promotion. So if I owned a club now and there was a local construction company that wanted to give me $5,000, I'd put their logo up on the back of the stage, for a few months in trade or something. That would be great to get those kinds of sponsors, but I was never any good at that. I never did that. In my 20 plus years of owning clubs, I never had any quote unquote sponsors. I did a lot of co-production, co-marketing, advertising. You mentioned newspaper and stuff. At a point, we were getting free listings in the newspapers under entertainment because we were one of the few entertainment venues in town.
Mm-hmm.
But I did, when I had some money, buy some ads. And, you always have to capture a new audience. When you have a comedy club and you're trying to get 1,000 people a week through the doors, there's going to be an attrition. People aren't going to come week after week after week. The average person maybe goes to a comedy club once every couple months. So that means you need a pool of 10,000 people to keep the club full every week, right?
Yeah.
So it's a growth thing. It does take time, and like you said, it's a combination of free promotions, street hustling, and paid advertising, but no sponsors in my case.
Yeah. So for my last question, a lot of people think if they build it, they will come. But for many, right? Kevin Costner. There you go. If you're starting a business, for the most part, you have to do some research. You have to figure out whether or not it's even going to be a viable option. Did you, by chance, and sometimes people are lucky when it comes to this, did you do any research? Did you try to understand whether or not a comedy club in that area will work, whether or not people even go out?
Well, I was young. I was only 24 at the time, and I was really I'd already started a couple companies earlier, so I knew how to start a company. And I saw stand-up comedy was not a known art form in 1980. It was the kind of entertainment that was between strippers at a strip club or between jazz bands at a jazz club. There was not a lot of mainstream comedy. And as I mentioned, I was the 12th full-time club in the entire United States when I opened. It was a brand new entertainment art form at the time, but I was excited about it. But to answer your question, I took the research I did by going to San Francisco and LA, where there already were a couple clubs, not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw how much fun the audiences were having, how it helped people forget their bills and the troubles for the day. And to be honest, I was a young entrepreneur. I saw the money coming in the door.
Yeah.
And so when I came and decided to open a club in Sacramento, it was on a wish and a prayer. I opened my doors, I spread the word the best I could, and I crossed my fingers people were willing to pay for it. But I lucked out. I caught that wave before it really got big. I mean, when I opened, there was hardly any comedy clubs in the country.
Mm-hmm.
By 1984, 85, it was like Starbucks. Every disco had turned into a comedy club right there. Even here in Sacramento, we ended up with 3 or 4 of them, and we're not that big a town. Of course, I own 2 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you build it, they will come. Sometimes that plays into your gut feeling. And then, like you went to go look in California, and you saw that there was a pain in the market, and you wanted to solve that. You want to bring that to your community, bring it to your city. And so it definitely falls into a gut feeling. And for many entrepreneurs, it just falls into a gut feeling and not necessarily doing all the research to see if it's going to be a viable option. People just look at the opportunity versus the viability. And I think in looking at that from that perspective, or looking at a business from that perspective, sometimes you look at your community, you look at your situation, the resources that you have available, and you're like, man, I wish there was a comedy club in my city.
Sometimes being an entrepreneur means taking that risk, taking that leap of faith. Mm-hmm. It has to be something you're interested in or passionate about. And for me at age 24, I was so excited about the comedy entertainment, but also about the financial possibilities. There was no guarantee, of course.
Yeah.
And there was plenty of times that I lost money. In fact, I was in the red for the first 6 or 8 months of my club.
Yeah.
But, on a whim and a prayer and a lot of hard work, it panned out over time. And that's what it's like, whether you're opening a retail business or a restaurant. It's not going to be, open the doors and people show up and you're a millionaire. You have to work hard.
For
Being
sure.
an entrepreneur is challenging, it's risky, and it's hard work, but it can be very fruitful.
Yeah, and I was just looking at the idea of trying to mitigate the failure, mitigate the business collapsing, and in doing so, doing some research. But like you said, sometimes grit and perseverance overpower anything that you might overcome. So many times we are in the red when we start a business. Anyways, we're just building it, we're understanding it. It's a work in process, and you're going to have failures along the way, and you're going to learn from those failures. So, but definitely we've covered a lot of information. We've covered venue and headliners, openers, hosting, ways in which we can market it. A lot of information in a short period of time. How can our listeners get a hold of you, brother?
Well, let's share a little information. If you're interested in getting into comedy or learning something, I recently wrote a book called 20 Questions Answered About Being a Stand-Up Comic. It's available on Amazon or the bookshop online. And that's a good book for a low price to teach you about really the basics of being a comic. As far as my podcast, if you're interested in stand-up comedy and enjoy it, check out Stand-Up Comedy, Your Host and MC. It's available on Apple, Spotify, all major platforms. And it's a great podcast because I have not only share comedy from the Bob Saget's and the Jay Leno's that work for me, but also I interview a lot of professional comics and they share their story, and you can learn a lot about the industry by listening to the people that have lived it and succeeded in it. And then the newest thing, Abel, if I can share,
Absolutely.
if you just like enjoying stand-up comedy, there's a new app and website called Stand-Up Comedy Podcast Network, standupcomedypodcastnetwork.com. You have access to over a dozen podcasts. There's jokes of the day, there's audio bites, and great video of people like Jay Leno, Bob Saget, Dana Carvey, Dave Coulier, Ray Romano, on and on and on. So if you get a chance and you like stand-up comedy, go to standupcomedypodcastnetwork.com.
Awesome. Well, there you go, guys. Scott Edwards, it was a pleasure having you on the show today. You're an inspiration to me and our listeners, and I'm so glad to have had you on the show today. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Garza. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Well, there you go, guys. Scott Edwards. It was a pleasure having him on the show today. Be sure and check out all his information. It's going to be in the show notes. The link to his app, the link to his book, the link to his podcast, all going to be in the show notes. Check out creativeentrpreneurship.net for all of our articles. And TC Podcast, we're also on locals.com if you want to support the show. And until next week, guys, keep on keeping on.